As a member of the Dricino family, Dricino takes on a great responsibility to guide Prince Camden through his rite of passage in place of her brother, who cannot come. In the city of Histero, she must overcome cultural differences and gender prejudice, as well as deal with the tense relationship with the arrogant prince.
Chapter 3.
After taking a day to ponder all the things my brothers had taught me, I spent the rest of my time preparing for my trip. It mainly consisted of me sitting with Aunt Patricia at her house on the other side of town and going over my manners and how to behave like a lady, so the king and queen didn't think they were leaving their son in the hands of a savage. And while I didn't consider myself that wild-looking, my hair could use a trim, my eyebrows a good plucking, and I could work on making my smile less snide. My appearance was going to throw them off enough, as it was since they were expecting Talon. The least I could do was look like a respectable member of the Dricino family. I even graciously allowed my aunt to tailor a casual but pretty dress for dinner under one condition: she didn't tell my brothers about it. Today was the day I set off for Hysteria. Unfortunately, since I was coming back with Prince Camden, I couldn't take Elisa, or we would have to make too many pit stops on the way back so she could rest. Marco would be my companion, one of the larger male dragons we had. He had done the journey twice already with Codden and Giles, so he knew his way if I got us lost. Which could happen. I was never one for maps and usually followed my instincts or marker. So don't ask me for direction, even though she wasn't coming. Eleazar was beside Marco, brushing up against him, like a cat fluttering her wings flirtatiously. She wasn't old enough to mate yet, but he was, and he was definitely one of the finer studs we had. I wasn't surprised she'd taken a liking to him. In 2 years, when she was old enough, I convinced the breeders to put them together. I decided. Dad slapped a hand on my shoulders, startling me. "You ready, kiddo?" "No, obviously." My brothers were here. I couldn't show them how scared I was. Sensing my nerves, Marco and Elisir lowered their muzzles to me and let me rub their faces. They hummed in harmony and closed their eyes. The song they sang eased me more than anything my family could have done. Swallowing a lump of courage, I faced my brothers and grinned wildly at them. "Don't burn the place down while I'm gone. It's your fault if it does, Cat." Rolling his eyes, he pulled me into a brotherly hug so big it lifted me off the ground. "Take care of yourself, Kara," he whispered in my ear before dropping me. "Paint the castle halls red for me, will you?" he added louder, less big brother and more troublemaker. Cadden came up for his hug, shoving Casper out of the way. Remember what we talked about. It's not often you get to run off unsupervised. He winked at my flush and stepped away for Harry, who flicked lint off my shoulder. He took in my attire, thick leather jacket with a hood and pants that had a skirt hanging off each hip to give me the appearance of wearing a skirt, but the functionality of pants. He smiled. "I like this look on you. It's just enough femininity to flatter you, but also shows you're not afraid to jump into a fight." "Hopefully she won't have to do any fighting," Dad remarked, also eyeing the skirt pants Aunt Patricia had made for me. He no doubt will have a talk with her about making me look too much like a woman. I don't think he even wanted to acknowledge that I had breasts and big ones too. Shaking his head, Giles came over and gently tapped the bag he gave me last week. "Remember, don't sit on it and don't drop it. You don't have to tell me twice, you idiot." I was not getting blown up on my first time leaving the valley. I looked around for my last brother, but Talon was nowhere to be seen. He was an asshole, but his absence left a notable hollow feeling in my chest. Dad noticed my frown and chucked at my chin. "He'll get over it. Can't just worry about yourself." "Give this to King Brona for me." He handed me a letter sealed with our family crest and blue wax. "It'll explain to him why you're there and not Talon and a few business things that'll bore you." I kissed his bearded cheek, then stepped away from them all, suddenly feeling the weight of this trip on my shoulder. "I'll see you guys tomorrow afternoon." Being terrible at goodbyes, I quickly turned from Marco and climbed into his saddle. I brushed my fingers over his red scales, finding comfort in the familiar rough texture. He purred for a moment, then turned his head to look at me for permission to take off. I did a quick check to make sure I had everything, then gripped the handles and gave him the all clear. The dragon stepped back, then thrust his wings once, twice, thrice, and then we were higher than most of the mountains in the valleys. The tallest ones were too high for me to cross without passing out, so we followed the length of the valley for a short while until a shorter mountain came into view. I thought we were going to have to go all the way north to Thorn's Forest to find a low mountain, but just when its gnarly vines were coming into view, Marco banked right for the mountain he was looking for. We flew through a cloud to leave the valley then. The cloud cleared, my jaw dropped. I'd always considered the valley a beautiful place. Colorful and lovely in the summer, haunting and mysterious in the winter, but I had always found it cold and unwelcoming. Understandably so, with the dangerous wildlife and a few uninhabitable mountains. The plains were absolutely stunning. A cloudless sky smiled over the green and yellow plateau. I could see the ocean and the marvelous blue. It was from Marco's back. It was so warm, and I felt like the continent was welcoming me with lush, comely arms. I held my arms out to my sides and let out a howl of excitement. This was it. My first time leaving the Randla territory. My first time seeing the world everyone spoke highly of. Wow. Oh, wow. It was a beautiful, liberating place. I'm going to have to fly out here more often. Marco, you think Elazar will like it? Yeah. His head bobbed more purposefully than it did to the rhythm of his wing beats, a low rumble starting in his chest and moving up his throat to escape his lips. I took that as a yeah. Any dragon would love to fly over the plains. They could spread their wings as wide as they want without fear of them being clipped by nearby mountains. He glanced back at me for a second before lowering our altitude, so we were only 100 feet off the ground. His shadow followed a herd of centaurs as they galloped over the stretch of green, heading for the Wayland River. Further ahead, they joined the unicorns and hippogriffs already drinking together. Several of their heads snapped up to the sky at the sight of our shadow Simran, but after seeing we weren't going in for prey, they found their way back to the herd and grazed beside the river. Once we ran out of animals to follow, Marco lifted us to his original altitude. I rubbed his neck in. Thanks. It was amazing to see so much wildlife gathered together and not killing each other. It was every beast for itself in the valley, and it was even more amazing that dragons could see this part of the world whenever they wanted. I'd always envied them for their wings, but I would forever be thankful I was as close to having wings as any human in this world. We flew for a few hours before villages came into view. Just as everyone said, they were barricaded in by tall, offensive walls. The people inside, from what I could see anyway, appeared to be happy and unbothered by such a looming object. I, for one, was glad we had dragons to protect us, so I wasn't caged in like that. The further east we flew, the larger and closer together the towns grew. They were all connected via a wide, steady-looking road, a trade route for merchants to expand their sales to other cities. As the day progressed, the road got busier until there were so many people on it at once. It got congested, and someone had to flag people to pass or wait their turn. It was insane. It was the worst when we got to the biggest city of them all, Histero. The massive city came into view, the ocean glistening in all its glory behind it.
I had half a mind to tell Marco to forget about the capital so we could explore the ocean, but I had an important appointment to make and Dad would be disappointed. Understatement.
If you ask me if we missed it. Like all the other towns we'd flown over, Histera was surrounded by tall stone walls that spanned from the furthest farm to the cliff edge, butting against the ocean. The city didn't look as caged in and cramped as the others did, having several large farms and a bit of forest, which continued on beyond the wall, wrapping around quite a bit of the city's boundaries on the outskirts of town. Then the buildings grew taller the deeper into the heart they got. Many houses of all sorts of shapes and sizes tiled, so they seemed to get steadily larger the higher up they went climbed up the hill. At the top of the hill, an elegant castle stood tall and proud against the ocean's roaring beauty. Its sleek spires rose high, the stained glass shimmering in the sunlight. Just behind the castle there was a patch of grass, of which Marco was angling for. Before we could get close to the castle, however, 2 dragons and their riders broke off from the cliff wall below the castle and met us in the sky. I couldn't see their faces, but their jagged, scale-like armor was bulky and intimidating. Just in case, I dropped my hand to the hilt of my sword, buckled safely to Marco's saddle. State your business and name one of them called. Just by his voice alone, I knew they weren't any of the princes. His voice was too low and gravelly. I peered at Marco to see what his thoughts on these men were. He hovered casually near them, eyes trailing from the yellow dragon to the blue one, out of curiosity more than alarm. So I deemed they weren't a threat, just protecting their castle. My name's Dricino, and I'm here for Prince Camden for his Rite of Passage. They glanced at each other. I could barely see the scrutinizing look in their eyes when they turned to me. The man cleared his throat. We were under the impression Dricino would be arriving today. Yeah. We had to make a last-minute change. I have a letter from my father for the king. It'll explain everything. Thank the gods Dad wrote a letter. They didn't seem particularly pleased to have me here, and I don't think I'd be welcomed without the letter. They exchanged another look. Marco grunted at the dragons, of which they responded with their own grunts and hisses. I knew they were dragon princes the instant the men lowered their gaze to their dragons as they spoke telepathically. If they weren't the princes my brothers trained, they must be King Corgrona's younger brother's dad had trained these. They suddenly seemed more intimidating. Come with us, the other man finally spoke. We will sort this out on the ground. Marco followed the 2 dragons down to the patch of grass he'd originally aimed for. I slipped off the saddle and stretched my legs, relieved to finally be on the ground again. Flying was fun and always amazing, but flying all day was starting to cramp my legs and chafe them. The men approached me, hands on the hilt of their swords. Pretending not to be bothered by such a cold welcome, when my brothers had boasted about the Acker's hospitality, I reached into my bag and fished the letter out for them. The taller man snatched it out of my hand and flipped it over to inspect the seal. He pursed his lips, then lifted his eyes to me while handing the letter to his brother. I wasn't aware Grant had a daughter. He had 6 sons, Casper, Cogn, Harry, Giles, Talon, and Kyle. I corrected him, but my brothers call me It's easy to miss the end, and depending on who's writing, it can look like an L. When they clearly didn't care for my explanation, I added, I am a Dricino. Grant, Dricino is my father, and you just listed all my brothers. Why is this a problem? How hard was it to grasp that my father sent me instead of telling? The princes had seemed smart when I met them, but maybe that didn't translate over to their uncles. The dragon prince called over a servant and handed them the letter, directing them to give it to King Crona immediately. You will remain here until told otherwise. He ordered me, then hurried inside, leaving his brother to babysit me. Grumbling, I flicked my hood off and freed my hair from its ponytail. There was something especially soothing about having my hair free in the sea breeze. The salt and seaweed in the air smelt so fresh and different from the mineral and mist I was used to. I leaned back against Marco's shoulder and looked up to him. I bet they threw a party when my brothers came here. The dragon puffed out black smoke, narrowing his green eyes on the man and 2 dragons with us. No, he wasn't happy with how they were treating me either. The man glared at Marco, then snapped his head to the blue dragon, who must be his bonded partner. If I remember correctly, her name was Namie. She must be telling him off because he suddenly looked sheepish and wouldn't look me in the eye. Uncle, a new arrival, called. He came storming out of the doorway. The other man had gone through. His red cape billowed behind him as furiously as the look in his dark green eye. A silver crown shone in the fading sunlight, somehow adding a spark of menace to his walk. Don't be rude to our guest, he snapped once he was in front of us. Young Cully is welcomed here, as is every member of the Dricino clan. The prince smiled warmly at me and took me in head to toe to chest. Wow, you grew up. He scratched the back of his blonde head, removing his eyes from my breasts. Do you remember me? The hopefulness in his voice was hard to miss. To be honest, every prince that stayed at my house looked very similar at 21, and none of them had a beard. Prince Alaric had tried to grow one during his stay, but it was a patchy, scraggly mess. This man's beard was well-groomed and patchless, reminding me of Casper. This man wore his beard much, much better than Casper did. No, Prince L.A., you look so old. Older than the 28 he was now. It must be the beard. Men are always growing beards to look older. At least my brothers definitely did, so why not the next king of Walla, too? He frowned a fraction at my remark, and you look so womanly. Don't want to play rough with your brothers anymore.
God, it was so weird to have a man I had met 7 years ago tease me about my womanly features like my brothers did.
A prince, no less. Sorry, Prince, this is all for show. As soon as I get home, it's all coming off. His eyes flashed mischievously. Camden is a lucky man. I flushed, realizing what I might have implied. I mean, I'll still be wearing clothes. I rushed to explain just the hand-me-downs from my brother. Not that I gestured to my attire, which I should apparently wear more often if I was going to get checked out this much. Chuckling, he chucked my cheek. Come on, little Calais, I'll show you around. I'll have a servant take care of your things.
I only took a step to follow him before I remembered Giles's bag.
I hurried back to Marco and snatched the bag away before the servant could go near it. She glared at me, insulted that I didn't trust her with my things. Trust me, sweetheart, you do not want to be handling this bag. With care and a sheepish gaze, I handed it to Prince Allah. Giles wanted me to give this to and your brother. He opened the bag curiously, then grinned cheekily.
Excellent. We were running low, thank you.
He opened the door for me and watched carefully as I took in his home. A small smile flitted onto his face when I gaped at the luxurious carpet welcoming us inside. Tapestries draped over the stone walls, filling the castle with color. For some reason, I always imagined castles being dark and dreary inside, but it appeared the Eckers tried very hard not to fall prey to that stereotype. The further down the hallway we went, the more scents filled my nose. At first, it was lavender, no doubt from the polish a servant was using on the furniture. Then it became much more homely. Bread, stews, meat. The kitchen had to be nearby. My mouth watered at the mere thought of feasting like a queen tonight. Depending how tonight went, Cadden might have to step up his game. Of course, I'd help by grabbing the recipes from the cooks. I hope you have an appetite, Prince Ailey said with a smile, noticing me sniffing out the food. Because whenever we have guests, our chefs go overboard. I rival a dragon's appetite, I warned him. Also, I have to compete with 5 hungry boys all the time. If I don't eat to my fullest, I'll have to wait until my next meal to quell my stomach. You'll fit nicely here. Kelly dinner won't be for another 2 hours. However, would you like to see my brothers in the meantime? I'd love to. If Prince Ella looked this different, I was curious to see how the others were farting. We found a large staircase which took us to the second floor, or down to the dungeon, whatever castles had beneath the main floor. Well, I was about to find out Prince Ale was leading me straight down 2 flights. It was a little darker down here, having less natural lighting guiding us. Torches lit our way instead, showing off the rugged walls of a cave rather than the stone that was above.
I slowed my pace, wondering if he was leading me to the dungeon.
He laughed, slipping his arm behind my back to keep me moving. Do not fear, Calliope. I believe you will appreciate where I am taking you. Your brothers did. Okay, but if it's a brothel, I'll tell you right now, I'm not as like my brothers as you think I am. That only made him laugh harder. We had to stop so he could take a moment to compose himself. His mirth was so loud and booming, it bounced off the walls and alerted others to our presence. One by one, the Acker princes emerged from a room just a little ways down the hall. Unlike Princess Lai, they were not wearing formal attire or much at all. Prince Liam was shirtless with loose-fitting pants that hung low on his hip. As far as views were concerned, I definitely wouldn't be complaining about the six-pack he flaunted to anyone. My brothers were the only men I'd ever seen naked, so before I hadn't found a man's naked body that attractive, But now I was starting to understand why women asked about my brothers all the time. I'd been cruel to not reveal any detail. I swallowed a lump in my throat when I realized they were all half naked and broad-chested. I don't think my father had this in mind when he sent me to the castle, full of respectable princes. Brother Prince Liam Boom, skipping to our side. You left to greet Talon and come back with a girl can't say. I'll complain too much about it. He winked at me, which somehow made his half-nakedness worse and my flush deepen. Prince Ali slapped his arm. Liam, this is Kali Dricino. His eyes bugged and he looked me over again, a pleasant surprise spreading across his features.
Little Colleen,
Last time I saw you.
you were taming dragonlings and kicking your brother's ass.
What are you doing now? Same. And now I'm to go through the Rite of Passage with Prince Camden. The fuck? The only prince I didn't recognize outright. He crossed his arms over his particularly toned chest, green eyes piercing. Despite him being the youngest, he was the second tallest in the family, coming right behind Prince Eli himself. Where's Talon? They were all equally eager to hear about Talon and stepped closer to me. I tell you, having 4 very hot, bare-chested guys crowd was very overwhelming, and I was this close to having a heart attack. I swallowed again, biting back any childish squeaks and squeals wanting to escape my mouth. I'm not sure how much my father wants me to divulge, but Talon is being punished, so he will not be helping Prince Camden. I didn't know you were training to be a guide. Prince Olaric said curiously. I went. I wasn't. I confessed, rubbing the back of my head and hoping they'd go back to checking me out instead of glaring like Prince Camden was. My brothers gave me a crash course last week. You have got to be kidding me? Prince Camden snarled, shaking his head furiously. Talon said the same thing. The joke was meant to lighten the mood, but it appeared to only induce his rage. He paced, holding his head in his hands. This is completely unacceptable. How can Grant do this to me? I'm so fucked. How the hell am I supposed to be a dragon prince if you don't know how to guide me? What made him think pairing me with a woman would be a good idea?
Hey, buddy, you got your work cut out for you. I'm the best dragon tamer in the family.
He snorted, then laughed, a short, curt sound that made me wince again. You are definitely not the best dragon tamer. We all know it's Casper. If I can't have Ton, I want him to guide me. Okay, buddy, the world isn't ending. Well, too bad you're stuck with me, you ungrateful, spoiled brat. He could be the Dragon King. No one talked that way to me. You can take it, or I can leave. Right now, and you can forget about bonding with the dragon. His glare twisted into something cruel and demeaning, storming right up to me. I put my hands on my hips and faced him head-on. Harry was completely right. If I could tame Ziller, I could handle little Cammy. Who do you think you are to deny me my right? Know your place, you boorish woman. My rage had a bad habit of taking over. Now was one of those times. I rammed my knee into his groin chapter. Prince Camden fell to his knees, cupping himself. Shock silenced everyone and stopped my heart. I was in deep now. I might as well keep going. I know my place. You spoiled brat. It wouldn't kill you to learn a little humility. Maybe I was treating him a little too much, like a dragon, and shouldn't have assaulted the prince, or even suggested he was beneath me. But who was he to call me a boorish woman? Righty, Prince Eli was saying the first one of the brothers to snap out of his auth-induced daze. He plucked me away from his brother, pushing me behind him in case. The brat thought about attacking me. Bring it on. I think we need to have a family meeting before dinner. Kali, dear, why don't you go with Jesse and get cleaned up for dinner? We'll see you then. In my simmering rage, I was about to ask him who the fuck Jesse was, but a tiny blonde appeared out of nowhere and took my hand. This way, please, miss. Prince Camden got to his feet and would have probably hit me if it weren't for his brothers holding him back. His face was red with fury. If he was a dragon, black smoke would have filled the space between us. He was definitely baring his teeth like a dragon. I looked him straight in the eyes before I flipped my hair over my shoulder sassily and spun on my heel to follow Jesse down the hall with a disgruntled himp. That would have made Xianxia proud. Camden yelled after me, calling me words I didn't think princes were allowed to use. I flipped him off and continued after Jessie, who released a relieved breath once we were out of the prince's sight. We went back up the stairs. You're crazy. You know that. She hissed, glancing over her shoulder as if Prince Camden would be chasing after us. No one mouths off to Prince Camden like that. Maybe they should. He clearly doesn't have any manners. I like his brothers. I wish I was guiding one of them. So it's true, she asked, flitting her large blue eyes up to me. You really are guiding Prince Camden through the Rite of Passage. Well, that entirely depends on if he wants a woman to guide him. I mocked, already fed up with him. Gods, I hoped he didn't want to do it anymore. Let Dad be angry with him for declining my offer. If he doesn't, he won't be going through with it. I've never heard of a woman being a guide before, she said, as if I hadn't said he might not be doing it. Are you that good, or is your family that desperate? I'm that good. I'm the only member of my village who's allowed to enter the Dragonlands, you know? I don't know what that is, Miss Jessie admitted, becoming more relaxed with every step we took away from the bratty prince. It's where the wild dragons live, just west of my village, on the other side of the end of the valley. No human has stepped foot inside. They don't trust them, not after dragon scavengers became a thing and picked them apart for part. But dragons were almost as rare as dragonbane, so dragon scavengers started hunting them and selling their scales, bones, blood, claws, horns, anything. Really? Every part of a dragon was valuable to someone. She blinked at me, surprised. Why'd they let you in? Then I understand their language. Dragons don't speak, only to dragon princes. She dismissed, then came to a stop in front of a double door entry. This is where you'll be staying for the night. Do you need assistance with anything? I bit my lip, trying to remember how to do my hair the way Aunt Patricia had taught me. I figured after how sour things went downstairs, I was going to have to make up for it at dinner with looks and decorum. Do you know much about hair and makeup? I think I'm going to have to get more dolled up than I'm prepared for, so the Ackers don't think I'm a savage. She giggled into her hands. I don't think the princess will mind that at all. I will help you, miss. You can call me Kyle or Kalai.
You know, I told her slipping into the room.
To keep up my cool though, I didn't drop my jaw or do a double take, but man, it was hard. The room was massive. The four-poster bed alone took up half of it, filled to the edge with pillows and blankets. My clothes were already tidied away on the dresser, my gown for tonight hanging on the bathroom door. The bathroom held a glorious copper tub that I definitely planned on using in a little bit. It sure beat the dinky tub I had to share with my brothers, who always wanted to use it whenever I tried to enjoy a bath. Couldn't a girl enjoy a bath without being rushed? The balcony viewed the ocean. Water spanned from the beach to the horizon, no islands or continents to be seen. I knew there was more. There had to be. Some of the dragons I had seen in the Dragonlands had different markings and horns than the ones born in my valley. They had to come from somewhere. I had so many questions I wanted to ask them, but the language I'd learned from them could only take me so far. They couldn't tell me about the world they'd seen and everything they'd experienced over the hundreds of years they lived. It was something I'd always envy of dragon princes, of the blood coursing through their veins that allowed them to communicate with a dragon the way I could talk to Jessie. She came up to my side and shrugged at the view. I'm sure you've seen better views on your dragon. Not better, I told her, but different. Yeah. I've never seen the ocean before. You're lucky to work beside this every day. I'm lucky. She looked at me like I was crazy. Girl, you live with dragons. I don't care what everyone else says. That's so badass. I frown. What does everyone else say? Who is everyone else? The other villages, she said, gesturing for me to follow her inside. She sat me down in front of a vanity mirror and examined my dress, biting her lip. People who don't get to see dragons every day are out of touch, so don't take offense, all right? People say, your village is full of dragon fuckers. The words didn't hurt. They confused me. How stupid can people get? Do they know how impossible it would be? Like, seriously, my best friend is a small dragon and she's 25 feet long and just She shrugged and went back to looking at my dress, seeing that I wasn't overly insulted by what other people thought about my village. This is cute. Did you make this?
Gods, no, my aunt. This is the first dress I've ever worn.
I hope it's okay for tonight. I didn't want to insult them by wearing pants. She nodded, thoughtfully, playing with the dark blue cotton. The skirt was ruffled and would be difficult not to play with, and the bust was held together by a lacy corset that had thick silk ribbon tied at the back.
The sleeves were tight until they reached the elbow, and then they would drape around my forearm.
The V-shaped neckline was a little deeper than I expected from my aunt, but she said it was about time men knew I had breasts, which were basically invisible in the loose, baggy shirts I usually wore.
This'll look lovely on you. It'll bring out the blue in your eye.
Your aunt is an amazing seamstress. I'll pass it along. I'm sure she'll appreciate it coming from someone who sees fine gowns all the time. Jessie smiled at me.
All right, I think I know what I want to do with your hair.
It's gonna take a while. Is that okay?
I spun my butt on the chair and faced the mirror, twirling the long brown hair in my finger.
Even after my aunt trimmed it, it still fell past my breasts. I imagined she could do a lot with it. As long as I'm not late, I don't care what you do to it. Oh, honey, I'm gonna make you look amazing. It took Jessie an hour to curl my dark hair, then pull the top half into a braid, which flowed seamlessly into the rest of my big curl. It was the first time it didn't look like the mane of a manticore, and with the silver eyeshadow to highlight my blue eyes and maroon lipstick, I might have been mistaken for a siren. And then, when I put my dress on, it was a good thing my brothers weren't here, who knew I could look as beautiful as the other women in my village. I might even rival the beauty of the groomed wealthy women here. Wow, I breathed, taking back any doubts I'd had in her confidence in her ability to make me look amazing. Thank you so much, Jessie. I didn't think this was possible. She snorted, waving it off. It didn't quite hide her blush. You're a naturally beautiful collage. You made it easy. Now I'll be right back. I'll see who your escort is. Escort. I twisted in my chair to look at her while she backed away for the door. We'd talked enough in the past hour and a half that she knew me well enough to know I already didn't like the sound of this. Every lady needs an escort to dinner. Rolling my eyes, I stood up and joined her at the door. It's a bloody dinner. Someone planned to jump me in the hallway. I've fought off dragon scavengers scarier than anyone in this town. She smiled faintly, patting my arm. I wish I could be as bold as you. If you don't want an escort, I guess I can't stop you from following me in the hallways where I will happen to pass the dining room in search of an escort for you. I grinned to hide my nerve. I'll wear a dress for these people, but I wouldn't have them telling me I needed a man to get by in the world. My brothers were all I needed. They weren't here right now to have my back or give me words of encouragement. So it was time I made them proud and showed the Ackers what the Dricino family stood for. Jessie squeezed my hand outside the dining room door. Good luck, she whispered, then hurried away. The guards on either side of the door gave me a dubious look. Where's your escort, man? I don't need one now. Open up. I'm starving. The one on the right bit is lit. Unsure, but the one on the left. Shrug. She doesn't look like she needs an escort.
Brian.
I think it'll be okay. He winked at me, then opened his side of the door. For me! Brian quickly followed suit, still a little nervous when he stepped into the room with me. King Krona and Queen Bethany sat at the very end of the rectangular table. They were a handsome couple, the queen with her long golden hair flowing freely around her shoulders, as shimmery as the mineral itself, and the king with his steely green eyes and square jaw. They both wore dark red King Cyrano's suit, hugging his robust body tightly, and Queen Bethany's gown pulling at her feet in endless waves of ruffle. Their sons sat along the sides, Princes Liam and Aloric on one side, while Prince Quentin got stuck sharing a side with Prince Camden. There was an empty seat beside him, which must be meant for me. It must be part of some plot, because I was sure Prince Ali wouldn't have forgotten to tell his parents I'd sacked their youngest. Or maybe he did, and he wanted to see how things played out if we were forced again. Giles would do something like that. Your Majesties, Brian announced, may I introduce Miss Calabrasina. King Corona muttered something about my lack of escort to his queen, and she smacked his chest, smiling brightly at me. Welcome, Kalai. Please have a seat. I bit back a remark about wanting to sit anywhere, but next to the man I will forevermore reference as the bratty prince. Remembering my manners, I offered a little curtsy, hoping the hour of practice I'd put into it was worth it, then sat down. When Brian pulled out the seat for me,
Camden chose to ignore my very existence, while the rest of his brothers welcomed me very warmly and perhaps a little mischievously as well.
their eyes twinkle. If having 5 brothers taught me anything, it was that something was up between these princes, and Camden was supposedly the victim. I read your father's letter. King Corona told me Dolly not interested in his son's shenanigans. It's a shame young Talon has strayed from your father's teaching. I heard he's a very talented rider. Yeah. So what Talion could maneuver in the air with his eyes closed and navigate his way through the valley better than anyone in Plum. I tamed wild ones. I held back my bitterness. Yes, he is. Your Majesty. He's a natural. All your brothers are quite extraordinary. The king went on. I inwardly sighed. Here we go. They were going to send me back and demand one of them guide Prince Camden. It didn't matter how good I told people I was. No one believed me. They all thought I was crazy because I talked to dragon. And some people didn't believe a woman could tame a dragon as well as a man. My eyes slid over to Prince Camden. The bastard spoiled brat got his way again.
Yes, they are.
Your Majesty, my father is an amazing teacher. I agreed remorsefully, but I think my brothers are talented without my father's guidance. We've tamed more dragons than my ancestors have with less casualty. A twinkle lit up in King Crona's eyes, amused by my melancholy. Your father says you are his best tamers, and that not only is Prince Camden lucky he has you as his guide, but you will help him find a powerful partner. One that will suppress any dragon we've welcomed in these walls. Okay, I didn't care if it was rude. I gaped. He did. Are you sure you didn't misread it? Your Majesty, Dad had faith in me. I knew that if he didn't, he wouldn't have given me this task. But I never realized he'd thought that highly of me. I was only joking partly when I bragged about being the best in the family. I honestly thought Casper was more worthy of that title. He smirked. I never thought I'd see the day a king would find me so amusing. Grant's handwriting is quite clear. Mr. Sino, I apologize for my son's behavior early. I hope you will still take him under your wing. To keep the welling pride and smugness at bay, I cleared my throat. Under one condition, Prince Camden has to apologize for calling me a boorish woman. Said Prince groaned and dumped his head into a hand and muttered something about insufferable women. Oh, yeah, if he wanted to be a dragon prince, this guy was going to have to work on his attitude. He could treat people however he pleased here, but when we were on my turf, he had to follow my rule. King Shruna's smile grew while his sons exploded into a barrage of snickers that shook the table all except Prince Camden anyway. Even Queen Bethany was having a hard time hiding her mirth under her hand. Very well, King Crona managed. Camden will apologize wholeheartedly for how he treated you upon your arrival. In case the authority in his tone wasn't enough, his dark gaze cut into his son. Pressing his lips together in a tight line, Prince Camden stepped away from his seat and got down on one knee before me, holding a hand over his heart. His ash blonde hair brushed over his eyebrows, not quite able to hide the seething hatred in his green eye. You know, if he wasn't such an asshole, I'd say he was the most attractive prince in the room, and that said something. He looked mighty fine in that suit, and underneath was even more to be desired, from what I'd seen anyway. But it was the sharp jaw and straight nose that set off a new kind of butterflies in my stomach. These ones warmed my core and made it hard to breathe. Who knew someone could literally be breathtakingly handsome?
I thought women made that up.
Mr. Chino, please accept my apology. He forced plastering a smile. I did not mean to offend you. I was taken aback by your beauty. It makes a man do and say stupid things. His brothers howled, and I did my best to fight the blush creeping up my cheek. Man, he sure knew how to apologize. even went as far to say I was beautiful.
Of course, he didn't mean it.
Why would he find me a peasant attractive? I cleared my throat, suddenly finding it hard to think of words. Thank you. I accept your apology. He bowed his head and kissed my knuckles, inducing a rush of heat through my body. When he lifted his gaze, his eyes said, "You're dead to me," which I wasn't going to argue with. I deserved it. I'd humiliated him in front of his family, more specifically, his brothers, who will undoubtedly never let him forget this night. Thank you for your leniency. Cold as ice, he rose to his feet again and took his seat beside me. Wonderful, King Corona said, silencing his sons. Now let us dine. On cue, the doors opened and several servants poured in, holding massive trays that looked like it might be too much for some of the smaller women. I recognized Jessie in her black maid's outfit. She came around to my side, placing a tray of beef sirloin in front of me with a wink. This girl knew what I liked. She asked me if I wanted her to serve me. Noticing everyone else had someone serving them food from the various trays on the table, I shrugged. Sure, what would you like? That was a dangerous question. Everything looked so good. Can I say everything? Prince Camden's eyes slid over to me briefly before he snorted, then went back to talking to his server. Jessie smiled fondly at me. You can have whatever you want. I'll put a bit of everything on your plate. And if you have room for seconds, I'll pick your favorite. I could get used to this whole royal treatment thing. You are the best. But just make sure you get the sirloin first.
The princes are eyeing it a little too much for my liking, of course.
She then proceeded to go around the table and fill my plate with food. She made small conversations with the royals while she waited her turn, and I noticed Prince Alaric's eyes falling on her the longest out of anyone in the room. When he caught me looking, he sipped at his wine to hide his rosy cheek. Jessie placed the plate in front of me, then told me she'd be with the other servants outside if I needed anything. I felt bad that I couldn't share this meal with her, but made a mental promise to stash some for her if I saw her later. So, Calais, can I call you Calais? Queen Bethany asked, after we'd been silent while we enjoyed the best food of my life. Cadden definitely needed to step it up a notch. I nodded behind my wine glass to help wash the scalloped potatoes down. Tell me something about yourself. A young woman such as yourself must be very interesting. Growing up with 5 brothers must have been difficult. I shrugged, dabbing my mouth clean of crumbs. It can't be any worse than raising 5 sons. I love my brothers, and I wouldn't change them for anyone else. Come on, Prince Quinlan teased. Don't tell me. You don't wish Giles was a little less fanatic. Please, he wouldn't be Giles if he wasn't trying to blow something up. Just last week, he almost got us. And my best friend killed so I abandoned him on the side of a mountain. I peered at Prince Camden, hoping he realized I wasn't beyond leaving him on a mountain if the need arose. The queen covered her mouth in surprise that I'd do such a thing to my brother. Don't worry, I told her, amused. He called for a dragon and came home before dark. It's not the first time I've done it, and it won't be the last. She smiled faintly. Tell me about this best friend of yours. Oh, Phyllis, she's a dragon. We've been joined to the hip since I was 2. She hatched in my lap. Back when Dad was trying to turn me into a hatcher. She was the first dragon I ever tamed. Queen Bethany gave it some thought, while Prince Liam leaned on the table towards me with a dubious look. Your best friend is a dragon. Of course you matter. She was the small green dragon that followed me everywhere because she didn't trust you with me. He frowned, tapping his chin. Is that what she was doing? I thought you were training her. No. She has trust issues. I'm the closest thing she's ever had to a mother since hers was killed by dragon scavengers.
I was the first person she saw when she hatched, and she imprinted on me.
I think of her more like a sister, though. The thought of being a mother at the age of 2 makes me uncomfortable, especially since I didn't raise her much, like how a female dragon would raise her. Yeah, I'm much nicer. I think that's why she's developed a sassy complex. Prince Ali joined his brothers. Frown dragons can be sassy. I didn't find that when I went to Plumnor, he's very sassy. Well, it's just like how not all people are sassy. I explained to him. Of course, Niece isn't sassy. He's more quiet and reserved. He agreed. How did you know that? I met him. I replied simply, it doesn't take much to learn about a dragon's personality. Actually, all of yours have similar traits to you. Prince Camden will probably find a grumpy dragon partner. This is ridiculous. Prince Camden snap-dropping his cutlery on his plate angrily. You make it sound like dragons are exactly like people. They're not. They're giant lizards with wings, animals. You are a fool if you think you can understand them.
Farewell, family. I'll never return home to you if you force me to be guided by this woman.
With that, he stood up and stormed out of the dining room. I bit back a groan.
Aye.
If that was his view on dragons, then yes, we would be spending a very long time together. No dragon would accept him, let alone respect him, if he thought they were mindless creatures. Forgive him, Queen Bethany beseeched me. He's had a hard time. It's difficult being the youngest. All of his brothers have already passed their rite of passage and can do all these amazing things while he's stuck on the ground magically. It's frustrating. The brothers she spoke of were silent, speaking volumes of how frustrating it must be for him. From the day they were born, they were expected to learn of their magic and then undergo the rite of passage so they could protect their people. While his brothers were defending their lands, he was left behind, a part of the people who needed defending. Yeah, well, that was no excuse for his actions. He wasn't the only one who had it rough. I stood up. I understand being frustrated leads to dangerous waters. I find it incredibly frustrating when no one will take me seriously because I'm young or a woman or because I understand something people don't bother to understand. You don't see me throwing fits and insulting someone who only wants to help him. So you will guide him. The king pressed, disregarding my clear dislike toward his son.
Yeah.
Not for him, though. I wanted to prove to the world and myself that I could do this. I could do anything I put my mind to, whether it was a man's job or a woman's, dangerous or safe at home. Most of all, I wanted to make my father proud. He talked me up to the king, so I better make damn sure I could deliver. The video is about to end, but the adventure has just begun. Don't go away. Subscribe to our channel, and next time we'll fly even higher.